Jimmy Kimmel's suspension and subsequent reinstatement have kickstarted a lot of conversation and speculation, and you and I need to talk about this. I'm Marcus Peter. So, once again, we see the double standards that dominate the modern media landscape. For years now, late-night comedy has been devolving into a platform for leftist partisan grandstanding. Because Kimmel, once he was a competent comic, he's become nothing more than a mouthpiece for progressivism.
The royals are expected to greet the president and first lady tomorrow, but some clever Brits are already rolling out, I wouldn't call it a red carpet exactly, but rather a King Kong-sized photo of Trump with his buddy Jeffrey Epstein. This is right outside Windsor Castle.
He throws red meat consistently to the ideological left.
Donald reaches over and gives her a little tap. He taps her like he's hoping ketchup would come out. And she didn't really respond. Maybe that's their signal for my diaper is full. I don't know.
His suspension was not an attack on free speech. His defenders are shrieking that, I know that. But it's really a natural consequence of it. In a free society, speech is permitted. But so are the social, economic, and cultural repercussions that flow from it. So the left's rage over his temporary fall from grace is comical. I mean, these are the same activists who have orchestrated cancellation after cancellation of conservative voices. You see this in academia, entertainment, business, and now, when the winds of accountability shift, they're howling in protest. I mean, you have to admit that there's a hypocrisy of narrative here, and it's being laid bare before all of us now. The American founders knew free speech was essential to liberty. So you had Madison, they call him the father of the Constitution, and he reminded us the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. So freedom of speech allows for that diffusion of knowledge, for open debate, the exchange of ideas in what we call the marketplace of ideas, for the contest of ideas. But nowhere did the Constitution promise freedom from consequence. In fact, that's the whole point, that the consequence of free speech, the check and balance of free speech, is the virtue of the republic. Alexander Hamilton, he wrote in the Federalist Papers, liberty can never be safe if the people tolerate the abuse of it. And so the First Amendment guarantees the right of the citizen to speak without government reprisal. But it doesn't immunize a talk show host for the consequences of his speech in the marketplace of ideas or in the court of public opinion. Kimmel's defenders conveniently ignore this distinction. Conservative philosopher Roger Scruton once remarked, the freedom of speech is not the freedom of abuse, but the freedom to argue. Kimmel's brand of comedy in recent years has been less about argument and more about abuse. Mocking conservatives, it's become a staple, it's almost stereotypical. Mocking Christians, mocking traditionalists, cheap caricatures, while cloaking himself in a kind of virtue of tolerance. That was always going to backfire, and it's nothing short of ironic now that the left, which perfected cancel culture, is now finding itself recoiling when some of its own are held to the same standard. You've got J.K. Rowling, you've got Gina Carano, countless conservative academics. They've been professionally hounded for words tamer than what Kimmel said. But the very mob that exulted in their destruction is now suddenly discovering a deep concern of free expression. When speech advances their agenda, they defend it. When it threatens their agenda, they destroy it. Kimmel's suspension and reinstatement have pulled a mask away from this hypocrisy. Kimmel's reinstatement is unlikely to reverse his trajectory. I've spoken about this in the past before, because there's been a broader decline of late-night television. The genre once produced sharp satire, cultural commentary. It appealed across the political spectrum. You can think of Johnny Carson, for instance. He had liberal leanings, sure, but he respected his audience enough to make jokes at the expense of everyone, including and especially himself. Today's late-night hosts, Kimmel, Colbert, they become preachers of progressive dogma. Their ratings reflect this decline, and I'm calling this, I think Fallon is close behind. Nielsen numbers show steady erosion in viewership over the last decade. Many viewers are migrating to on-demand platforms or simply abandoning the format altogether. The other problem is partisanship. It doesn't sell as well as they think. In 2014, Kimmel averaged around 2.8 million viewers. By 2023, his numbers had fallen closer to 1.5 million. And this trend is not only mirrored across the board, it's not reversing. The polarization of comedy into weaponized propaganda has killed the spontaneity that once made late night appealing. Every monologue is a sermon about Trump, about abortion, about climate change, and so audiences have been tuning out. The cultural capital has been spent. So Kimmel's reinstatement, I believe, won't resurrect the genre. I think it'll simply remind conservatives and independents that Hollywood elites care more about virtue signaling than about humor and about product that sells. This is the essential point, though. Free speech works on both sides, whether they like it or not. So yes, conservatives cannot demand liberty for ourselves while denying it for others, but progressives cannot demand liberty only when it benefits their tribe. I also think that Disney really was using this as a convenient platform for suspending him because his numbers have been tanking. Sociologist Robert Nisbet observed in The Quest for Community, when traditional bonds of faith and family erode, individuals look to the state or to mass culture for meaning. Late-night comedy has become one such substitute pulpit. But when a pulpit preaches constant division and incessant mockery of one entire swath of the United States population, the West's population, well, it loses its legitimacy. And Kimmel and late-night talk shows have really lost a lot of their legitimacy. The free market, viewers choosing to walk away, has become a jury, an ultimate jury. So rather than be dismayed by these spectacles, conservatives and biblical Christians ought to see these as opportunities, because every collapse of cultural idols clears the stage for truth. Chesterton once said, "The first effect of not believing in God is that you lose your common sense." And the absurdities of Kimmel and his ilk and that saga and the left's entire reaction to it prove Chesterton right yet again. We mustn't lament the decline of late-night television or the hypocrisy of the cultural left as if these are signs of defeat. No, let them fuel our resolve. Social conservatives have the duty to rise up with courage, not in rage, mind you, but with clarity and conviction and boldness. We must proclaim natural law, the eternal truths of Scripture, the person of Jesus Christ. These are the only ways forward for the West. If we can remain bold, if we can hold on to that truth, then, my friends, this is the posture that is required of you and I, including in times like this. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.